Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Good morning.
Man, it's been a bit of a circus this morning. So sorry we're so late. Meant to get here earlier, but things come up. What can you do?
Challenges.
How are you?
I am tired. I was up until 3 a.m. in the morning watching TV, so I'm not advising anyone to do that. God damn Netflix. We started binge watching something. Yeah, we found Dangerous Minds, Manhunt Dangerous Minds, which is based on a true story about the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, where one of the security guards was falsely accused for putting a bomb. He found the bomb and then he alerted everyone, and then he became the victim of his own success because they were looking to wrap it up quickly, and he fit the profile for FBI. So it became this kind of a very weird kind of a manhunt.
Interesting.
And it's a very well written story. We watched 6 episodes back to back, and I was like, man, we have to get up for a stream. God, I have to be up in 4 hours. Why was it? At some point, through my mind, it went like, maybe I don't sleep at all, and I watch it to the end. I was like, no, I'll be suffering tomorrow.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, dude, no. I've done it, but I was 20. I can't pull it off now.
Good morning, RAY3. Yes, my camera is working, at least for now. My audio wasn't working this morning, which is why we were so late.
And you haven't repaved your machine yet, right?
No. The thing is, okay, so Friday night, I was sitting down here, and I was just hanging out, and I managed to get it working. All of my audio stuff, mixers, and weirdly named mixers like Voice Meter, Banana, and Potato, and whatever. Managed to get everything working, right?
Okay.
And I guess my machine got an update Saturday or Sunday, and so now the software is still there, but none of the drivers are installed. So I'm guessing that's because the update to Windows installed after I installed the drivers after the Windows update installed and was waiting to do, and so like the drivers I guess were just pending and never got actually they didn't get put back in. I don't really know. Just my assumption, but yeah, it was. I had a long night. I went to bed way too late because I'm an idiot, and
not as late as me though.
Well, no, not as late as you, but I mean, if you went to bed at 3 a.m., you went to bed when I got up at 6.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about texting you. It's like, hey, I'm going to bed.
Yeah, because
see you in 3 hours.
Because my daughter got up early and my wife had to go to the dentist, so we were super, super tired. Everybody's dragging this morning, so.
We're pulling everyone down with us because we're miserable this morning. We're not. Hey, by the way, did you see the new swag? Check this out. 45 show. This is freaking awesome. And then we have the hoodie and this one. Love it. It's actually nice and warm. Maybe too warm. But our team has done a fantastic job. Do you want to know of these sweet babies? Give us something good. What? Wait. What happened to the banner at the top?
What banner? Oh, you know what? I forgot to turn them back on. See, that's what I mean. It's just been a really rough morning.
Let's get lit. Exactly.
I'm hurting. So,
morning, Sean. Coding with Sean is with us. Caparino GR is here. What is your hat? Where's your hat? There you go.
I put my hat on now.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway,
we're both festive. Not as festive as Friday, right?
Huh?
On Friday we'll be even more festive.
Yeah, Friday will be the day of festivities. So,
or shenanigans.
If I can get to sleep as soon as the show's over today, I might be rested enough for Friday. It will be a day of shenanigans. Friday's going to be a lot of fun. So
you know, sleep is overrated, right? We'll sleep plenty when we're dead.
No, that's what people say, but I'm completely exhausted. So. Anyway, so what do you want to do today? Are we going to talk about multi-tenancy? I mean, we've gotten 30 questions about it in the past 2 weeks, probably.
How about if we talk about PhDs and doctor in your title?
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. I saw that article and I was like, wait a minute.
Article? The internet is on fire. Honestly.
Well, no, but I mean, a guy who does not have a PhD but has an honorary PhD or honorary doctorate starts saying not nice things about people who do actually have proper PhDs in education, no less. It's just like, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand. Like, I don't have a PhD, obviously, and I don't know. I don't I don't get it, to be quite honest. I don't understand why. I don't understand why.
The fuzz.
Why I don't understand why they can't just leave things be. Like, if we're gonna sit around and write hit pieces on people, like of all the people, Dr. Biden seems like probably one of the last people you say. What's the worst thing you could say? Oh, well, you just got a PhD in education. Like who says that? I just don't. I don't get it. I don't.
Even
understand.
the fact that you have a PhD is a thing enough, right? Yeah. But it's surprising how polarized the people are around the world. It's not just the US. Apparently, it's all over. I'm like, I know. Seriously?
I know. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, I mean, just leave people alone.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I did a conference talk on Saturday morning, Developer Day in the UK, so DDD, and it was brilliant. So I was running one of my old demos, and I forgot, for some reason I tested the night before, and it was all working. And then on the morning off, I think I did a git reset everything on my repos. And since I did not install .NET 3.1, nothing would run. So I installed 3.1 live while I was talking to run my demos.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Good thing you got that new machine. I'm sure it installed quickly, at least.
It was super fast. I mean,
That's
.NET
cool.
generally installs fast, and it doesn't require a restart. But I was like, is this gonna work? Is this gonna work? No.
Well, that's cool.
Yes. It was Blazor messing up to me, which reminds me I need to update that repo and that code sample with the latest and greatest, because it's running on older framework.
Yeah.
Right. Supercool.com. Look at you. You got your whiteboard up there. Nice.
Yeah. Oh, and Caparino, our last stream's gonna be on Friday.
Yeah. Last stream for the year.
Yeah. So tomorrow.
Not last stream forever.
Today we're gonna do sort of some various things that we need to do. Tomorrow we're gonna do. We've got a Learn TV show about getting started with authentication and blah blah blah. And Friday we're just gonna have people come back and hang out and have a little bit of a Christmas party before we break, and then we will be back at the beginning of the new year after that. After Friday.
I am worried because AZ Wildfire is spreading the cheer all over the internet. And he's very excited already. I don't know what he's got.
I don't know what he's got planned, but it's probably gonna not end well for either of us. So,
well, then Friday could be the last stream ever for us, depending on what Richard does live on the stream.
Yeah, it could be. So, yeah, wow, AZ Wildfire's gonna be here, and it's never a dull moment when he's around. So,
he's the honorary third member of the team, right?
Yeah. So,
talk to me, man. Multitenancy. What is this shit? People are so confused.
Okay, so let's talk about multi-tenancy, because we do get a whole lot of questions about it, and it's one of those things that's really cool in regards to what it does, but it's also has a tendency to be kind of confusing, particularly because it has so much dependency on sort of the underlying understanding of Azure AD itself, right? So you kind of have to have this one book of knowledge, and then multi-tenancy sort of stacks on top of it. So on at the base level, there's this idea of you sign into an app, right? So if you work for, this is Contoso. So if you work for Contoso, and Contoso has some app, well, it's like it could be like your expenses app, right? Like expenses. Expenses.yourcompany.com, right? And so when you go to try to sign into that app, it sends you back to Contoso, and because it knows, and this is Azure AD, and because it knows who you are, it signs you in. You do whatever it is you have to do, and then you go back to the app, and then the app figures out who you are. and looks at your tokens and says, okay, cool, this guy or this person belongs here, right? So this is what's called single tenancy, where an application only knows about a single directory, and the only users who can sign in are users who exist in this directory, right?
Nice.
So if we had somebody else, so if we had Christos at fabricam.com down here, if you tried to sign in to this application, this app would send you over to Azure AD, but this Azure AD is going to be like, I don't know who you are.
Yep.
And it's never going to send you back to the app. So your app doesn't really have anything, doesn't know what to do with that. So in that case, nothing's going to work because that app's not intended for you, right? Like you're not the right,
Not part of the org. I'm not in the Contextual family.
Right. So you're not part of that organization, so you can't get in. And that's cool for internal stuff. If you think about what we used to do on-prem, it's identical. You're either in the Active Directory or the directory server, or you're not. And if you're not in there, you can't sign in, right? So that's cool. So that's single tenancy, and it's how the vast majority of applications are built. Is, well, I know who you are because you work here, and because you work here, I can trust that Azure AD says who you are, and that's it.
Right.
Where it gets more interesting, I'm going to erase some of these lines here. Where it gets more interesting is, like, say you're building a piece of software for somebody to sell. Say
it
you
could still
are
be a timekeeping app, right? That other companies use and buy.
Yeah.
Or
So
expenses
instead
app,
of
right?
instead of asking your internal enterprise developers to go build you an expenses app, instead you say, hey, we really like this. We really like this thing that we got online. We'll call this superexpenses.com, whatever. I really hope that's not an offensive website because I've never gone to it before. But so we'll say you've built an app called superexpenses.com, and you want to sell that to Contoso and any other org who wants to buy it, right?
Right.
So if we go the single tenant route, that would mean we'd have to make sure all of these users, so we'd have to add Joe in here and everybody else from your org. Everybody else from the orgs that you sell to. We don't want to do that. That has a host of problems, not least of which is now you've got all these users in your directory that you have to deal with, right? Like you have to figure out what kind of policy you're going to be the one who they call when their password doesn't work or whatever. So we don't want to give them new accounts. We don't want to copy those users and give them new accounts. And if you think about what we did for a long time on-prem, that's exactly what we did on-prem, right? And it's just not very, it doesn't have, it doesn't scale very well. So instead, we can make your app what's called multi-tenant. Now, multi-tenancy itself has a host of different meanings or things behind it. So let me get my mouse here. I'm going to push this up a little bit. So multi-tenancy as a concept usually means different things. We'll do this in red. So if we think about our traditional app, just some application that we wrote, we got users. User goes to the app goes to the database. Data flows back and forth, right? Multi-tenancy as a concept, what some companies do is they build this app and they basically make a copy each time, right? Oops. So you might go, I'll do a different color down here. They just make lots and lots of copies of the application.
Okay.
Okay, and the database. And so, they're hosting it for you, and they're running it for you, but the users they might go somewhere to like some magic URL. Right. So this user goes to contoso.superexpenses.com. And by virtue of doing that, this is a separate web server, this is an Nginx, and there's a separate web server sitting here. There is a separate database, and it's still technically single tenant. Because now everything within this slice is yours and only yours.
Right.
And this is fine, and there are lots of different ways to sort of figure out different ways to do things. But the problem is this is fairly inefficient. Because let's say Contoso has 1,000 users, and let's say that this magic unicorn org down here has 10. Ooh, you can't see that. I can't see it either. Let's say this magic organization down here has 10 users, right? Well, now I've got like a bare minimum database size I've got to have. Yep. So that's going to cost money. I've got a bare minimum app server size that I'm going to have, or bare minimum number of apps or app server instances I'm going to have to make this run. And so we kind of have there's a little bit of a range, and there's always going to be a floor. So at the bottom of the floor, it might be for, up to, let's say it's up to 100 users. And a single instance can support at the top up to 1,000 users, right?
Yep.
Anything under 100 is now inefficient and costs you extra money, right? Anything above 1,000 means that you have to add on in these 1,000 user blocks. So what if you've got like 1,050 users, 1,100 users, right? So you kind of get in this place where, and not to mention you've got all this infrastructure that you have to manage, and it ends up being sort of a big mess, right? So this is still sort of inherently single tenant. It's still something that there are many individual tenancies of the app. There are many individual instances of the app, right? So to get around that, instead of you having your own instance of the app, instead what we're going to do is we say, hey, we're a super cool new org, and we're going to build lots and lots of instances of our app, and we're going to have lots and lots and lots of little databases. And sometimes those databases might be encompassed, and you might have it split up by tables. You might have it split up by lots of different things, but ultimately there's some segmentation in here, and that segmentation means you get better efficiency out of it. Because now you've got lots of different app servers that are running, right? And users from any org can come to your app. And they all go to the same place. Mm-hmm. They all go to, superexpenses.com.
Right.
And then the app figures out, okay, cool, I need to go get your data. I need to search for your data. I need to filter by your data. I need to do whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So this is, the way that you start to segment this data internally, that is where a lot of the sort of tenancy questions start to come up, right?
Right.
So in years past, a long time ago, I used to work on a piece of software for a business, and we sold apps that extended Office. They added like expenses and CRM and all sorts of kind of getting started for a business type of apps, like especially for small businesses. And so we hit this problem a lot, where we would essentially, the bare minimum size to provision a user or provision a customer was just too much, right? It was still too much, and it was going to cost us way too much. So the cost of servicing the users was just going to be way too high to really be reasonable. So instead what we did is we had all of these individual app servers, right? And the individual app servers would do two things. They had a config database, and that was sort of the main configuration database. That was always attached. And then when it needed user data, it would go to a specific database. So we had user-specific databases, or not user-specific, but I should say org-specific databases. And those org-specific databases were the things that handled storing just your data. It makes it a lot easier for things like reporting, for things like exporting data, that sort of thing. But we could use some things like elastic pools, where we kept individual databases in the same servers essentially. But our app, our compute layer, was completely multi-tenant. So you always went to the same place, and it always worked the same way twice, right? You didn't have to go to some org-specific thing or anything like that. So let's talk about multi-tenancy when it comes to identity. We'll come back up here to our app. So in Azure AD, there's this concept of multi-tenancy, and what that really means, the thing that you get with multi-tenancy in Azure AD, is that now a user, say Joe at Contoso, he wants to go to super SaaS or superexpenses.com, right? Oops, I gotta move my screen up because I'm working on two different screens here. So Joe wants to go over to our Super Expenses app, and we've marked that as a multi-tenant app, right?
Yep.
So Super SaaS sees that and says, oh, I don't know who you are. I need you to go to Azure AD. So the first thing they do is they hit Azure AD, and they hit what's called the common endpoint. And you'll hear that thrown around a lot. And the reason for that is because in the URL is the word common. So it's called the common endpoint for just that reason. But it means that I can send any user here, and Azure AD is going to figure out who they are for which tenant they are a member of. So then Azure AD says, hey, type in your username, or maybe I already know who you are, at which point something happens called home realm discovery. And the user is sent up here to sign in. So now Joe goes back to his directory. Joe signs in, all right? And then gets sent back to the application. And the app says, oh, yeah, I know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because the application is the application has some specific config in there to say, oh, yeah, I know who this user is. Based on the fact that they're coming from any Azure AD tenant rather than from a specific one. Right.
These other Azure AD tenants are trusted by the common endpoint, right?
Well, they are Azure AD, so they're sort of inherently trusted by the fact that they're part of the overall system.
Yep.
So there's some specifics in here that we haven't gotten into that really drive a lot of this behavior, right? So let me erase this to make a little bit more room. So when you go to sign in. And when we look at a normal sort of typical, we'll call it a typical Azure AD OAuth sign-in flow, or OpenID Connect sign-in flow. So when you, the user, when you go to sign into an application, right, the application has a bunch of configuration, the client ID, the app ID, all that stuff that we have to put into the config of all the apps. So this knows where to go. So this goes to what's called the authorized URL. Right.
Yeah.
And the authorized URL, that's sort of that's the primary way to get a user. So this sends the user through a 302, sends the user over, sends the user over to this authorized URL. So now the user has left our app and is over at Azure AD. And there are a bunch of parameters that come after this. The user goes and signs in. Then we once the user is here, they sign in. We send them back to the application. So this is step 1, this is step 2. Step 3 is we redirect them back to the app with a bunch of data. The app then has, and there are lots of different, we're not going to talk about the flows specifically at the moment, but eventually the app gets a set of tokens. And one of the things is called an ID token. ID token. And some of the stuff that's in the ID token are things like the user's object ID, so their name, right? Or sorry, their unique identifiers. So we have things like object ID, that's their user ID. We have things like subject, which is also an immutable ID. There's a little bit of a difference here. An object ID can be consistent across all apps, whereas the subject ID is specific for that user within that application. So we'll talk about that later. So in that ID token, we get a user ID. We get 2 user IDs.
Your sound is a little bit like you're talking to a fan.
Huh?
Speak again a little bit.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's. Is
Anyway.
it me or does everybody else in the stream hear the same thing?
Maybe it's, I don't know. It's too hot for my hat. I didn't foresee that being a problem earlier. Anyway, so the app's going to get this ID token. It's got an object ID in it, which is a user ID. This is the thing that you should put into your database. Because this will never change for a user. Unless that user account gets deleted, it will never change. So you want to keep that user ID. You want to keep that user ID in your database. Don't store their email address if you don't have to, or if you do store their email address, just store it as extra data. You don't need to store it as their key. It is never going to be their primary key because people change email addresses all the time. People may have multiple email addresses. They may want to change them in the future. I've got accounts in places where some account I used like in college is the ID and I can't change it because I can add a different email address, but my ID is still the old one. Mm-hmm. Wired.com comes to mind because I sign into Wired with like an old Gmail account as the username, but
right.
actual email address and everything else is my current email address. It's just a mess.
Oh.
So, short version: don't store the email address and never rely on it as a unique identifier for a user, because it isn't.
Yep.
Right. In Azure AD, we'll send you the object ID only if you include the profile scope, because you can use that object ID to track users across apps, and so it's a little bit of an extra permission. At a bare minimum, take the subject, the sub claim. This is your user ID. So some of that's going to depend on your user requirements or whatever. The primary thing, though, one of the things that we do to validate this is one of the things that comes out of this is what's called the ISS claim, which is the issuer. The issuer, this is one of the sort of key pieces of these OAuth and OpenID flows. The issuer is who wrote this token out for you, right? So if we look at a typical Microsoft one, it's, login.microsoftonline.com, and then you'll have things like, you'll have a GUID here. So just a long 32-character ID. And it might have something like v2.0 at the end. Mm-hmm. This is your Azure AD Directory ID, which is also known as your tenant ID. Right? So because you get this value, your application can say, oh, okay, this user came from this specific directory. Right? Now, in a single tenant app, it's always going to be your directory. It'll never be a different one because that's the directory that you're in. It's a single tenant app. It only believes a single directory. In a multi-tenant app, however, your issuer value will be from the issuer value itself here, this GUID. This will be for the tenant the user signed in with. Oops, my thing keeps on unzooming here. This will be for the user, the tenant the user signed in with, right? So, in a multi-tenant app, you have to, in some ways, technically trust many different issuers, because the number of issuers you could get is the number of unique Azure AD directories that are out there. Now, there's some strategies for getting around that and whatever. But you'll also get something included called the TID claim. And the TID claim is the tenant ID. So you can look at it in here, but you can also just get it straight out of this claim here, right? This is essentially your organization key. So if your app has sold to me, your app can use this tenant ID claim, this tenant ID value to say, oh, I know this user, because they came from tenant 123, that means that they are a member of of my internal organization called 456. So let's put that maybe a little bit more into practice. So in my database, I have a table called organizations, and I also have a table called users. And so in my user table, I have their ID. And I don't know, whatever. Other. Their display name, their phone number, whatever you want to say. And in organizations, I might have just some random unique ID. And then I'll also have something like their Azure AD tenant ID. It could also be something like, just identity provider unique ID. It doesn't have to be Azure AD. Yep. I'm just using that because we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then we've got another table called, users to orgs, right? User to org. And in here we have a user ID, we have their tenant ID, and then, whatever, some other bits of data about that. But the key is that we have this linkage, this foreign key between the organization ID and the user ID, and this gives us this idea of Joe, the user, at a certain organization. We'll call it Contoso. And that's Joe at Contoso. So that's Joe when Joe's doing work for Contoso. So one of the things you can do is when your user comes to sign in, we take their tenant ID, and the combination of their tenant ID plus their user ID gives us their fully unique identifier. And now it's up to your app to say, okay, well, what do the users who are members of directory ID or my organization, what do they have access to? Well, now that's for you to go and do. Maybe you go and query a database and you say, give me all the records where user ID is 123 and tenant ID is 456. Whatever. There are all sorts of different ways to achieve that. But the net result is that these two things really end up being the key that you use to determine what kind of data you want your people to have access to, right? So, enough talking. Because I'm going to talk for one more minute. There's one other scenario we need to address, right? Mm-hmm. So on the other side of this coin is we've built our expenses app. So we got this expenses app, and it lets users sign in, and we know who they are. And so we know that Joe is a member of Contoso, and so we know who Joe's approvers are and all that sort of stuff by virtue of the fact that we've implemented that in our app. Now let's say we want to give Joe the ability to save his receipts to OneDrive, or to upload receipts from his OneDrive for Business, right? So Joe's a Microsoft 365 subscriber, and Contoso as an organization is. So we say, yeah, we want to get access to that too, right? So now we get into the whole thing of resource access. And resource access, because we hold that data, now we must use a multi-tenant app, right? Because now, in addition to signing Joe in and getting what's called the ID token to sign them in, now we also need to get what's called an access token, and the access token is what we use to access resources as a user. So, our multi-tenant app here, we register this application in Azure AD, and we say, hey, this thing needs the files read permission. So Joe goes through that and does that. Joe goes through and makes that commitment, right? Mm-hmm. He says, yeah, I want to sign in, and yeah, I want to grant this app access to read my files, and maybe even write my files to save, export something or whatever. So Joe goes and makes this decision, and now our application can go and access Joe's files in SharePoint and OneDrive for Business, we'll say. By doing this, however, Joe, who's in a completely separate organization from the application itself, Joe can grant access to these other apps to have very specific limited access to go and do things that's independent of the requirements of the other organization, right? They're independent of the publishing authors organization. So Joe works at Contoso. The app is published by Fabricam, we'll say, right? And Fabricam really has no bearing on what kind of requirements Joe has to go through to go and get signed in, because Joe's administrators are the ones who still manage that, not Fabricam's administrators, right? So let's take a look really quickly at what happens when you sign into a multi-tenant app. And this sort of is the final piece, right? So we've got our expenses app over here, our SaaS expenses app, right? Mm-hmm. Our SaaS expenses app is published by Fabricam. They register this app in their Azure Active Directory tenant. And there's a flag on there, and that flag is called multi-tenant. So
is this a point that we also talk about verified publisher as well?
Yeah, we'll come back around to it because it just muddies the water for now. So Fabricam says, hey, I've got this app, and I want anybody who uses Azure AD to be able to access it. Mm-hmm. I also need the files.read permission because I want to read people's files, right? Yep. So they go and publish this, and what happens is you end up with an application ID, sometimes called a client ID, and a service principal. And the service principal is kind of like a user, a service account, a user account, whatever you want to call it, that represents the app. So both of these have the same ID, and they live here in Fabricam's Azure AD directory, right? So now, we'll give him a new name. Carl at Contoso. He says, hey, this is a great app. I really want to do this, right? I really want to use this. What is AZ Wildfire doing? Ugh. So I see him out there stirring up trouble.
He's trying to get a hoodie because he's apparently not going to survive the Arizona winter. It's 58 degrees over there, and I feel for him.
58 degrees, what, in the dead of night at like 3:45 a.m.? It's the coldest it gets.
I did not question that, but we got new hoodies and new T-shirts, which are awesome.
It's cold and rainy where I am. I mean,
and
cold is
he
probably
wants
relative.
some. He's like, is there a merch site where we can go and buy these? Maybe we should set up one for our fans, for our friends.
So it's a whole new level of hubris. I think you enjoy watching the two of us crone and drone on about identity so much that you would like a T-shirt. Thus, you can pay us to buy one. Sorry, anyway. Okay, so then Carl says, man, this is a great expenses app. I really want to use this. So he goes and tries to sign in. So he goes to super SaaS app, superexpenses.com. It sends him over to go and sign in. So Carl, he comes over to the app first, right? The app says, hey, I need you to go to Azure AD to sign in. So he hits the Azure AD, the common one. The common one sends him to the Contoso Azure AD. Mm-hmm. So this is where Carl has an account already and where Carl can go and sign in. So at this point, what actually happens is the application ID stays the same. A service principal is created in this directory, a new service principal that represents this application.
So it points back to the application. So it's an instance of the application in effect, right?
In effect. Yep.
Yep.
That's essentially what it feels like, right? So because there's a service principal that gets copied or created net new into the other directory when the user signs in, now Joe at Contoso, who has now become the boss and is now the IT admin, Joe can come in here. Let me slide this over a little bit. Joe can come in here now and say, I don't want you to use this app. Or, in order to use this app, you must MFA first.
Nice.
Or, you can only use this app if you are connected to a company network. Oh, wow.
Hey, I need to jump for a couple of minutes. I've got a plumber here. I will tell you the story in a bit, but JP can continue with this one.
Thanks, okay.
You're doing a great job, my friend.
All right, good luck. Let us know what happens. Christos apparently had some. I got text this morning, and apparently he's got some. Some plumbing issues. Anyway, it's gonna be weird without him too. I'm so used to him being here and adding color commentary that it'll probably be a little bit strange. Anyway, all right, let's get this started. We'll go look at some code. Excuse me. So because we get the service principal and it's copied into Contoso, that service principal is it's also known as an enterprise app. You'll hear it called that a lot too. You get a proper color of pen here. You'll also hear them called enterprise apps. And because there's an enterprise app that represents it, now we get things like you can require MFA, you must be connected to CorpNet to use it, you can do what's called role assignment, so you can assign users to specific roles. And those roles are published by the developer, right? So the developer of the SaaS app, the Super Expenses app, that developer says, hey, I want to publish some roles called, admin and user, and we'll have another one called like read only. And by publishing those roles, Joe, who's our IT admin, Joe can now assign users into those roles. And what that means for you as the developer over here at Fabricam is that you are out of that business. It's called, the whole concept, I guess, is sort of a delegated administration. And so you're out of that business. You don't have to implement MFA. You don't have to go and implement a role system. You don't have to implement a whole UI so that an administrator at a company can come and sign users in. You don't have to do any of that work because it happens by virtue of Azure AD. It also means that you don't have to implement all the policies that a user might want. So if you're doing, so say your expenses are super ultra secure because they've got some like hypersensitive data in them or something. Instead of you having to respond to your customers and say, yeah, we're going to implement MFA and we've got to implement MFA with Duo and this and this and this and this and this because that's what our users want to use. Instead, it just comes by virtue of the fact that they're using Azure AD. So you don't have to re-implement any of that work, and you don't have to support 25 different MFA providers because you've got 20 customers that all want to use something different. The other side of that too is you don't have to worry about configuring your application to understand identity providers and set up SAML exchanges and OAuth and OpenID with other providers. All that happens at the Azure AD side. And so none of that work is really left to you. All that work is done for us. The big thing that you have to do is that when a user comes in and signs in, you need to know they're from organization ABC, and that means I do this in my app. It could be something as simple as, hey, I see your organization hasn't signed up. Do you want to sign up now, or take us to our pricing page, or whatever, right? So let's go look at this. We'll go look at this sort of in action, if you want to call it that. So I've got an app here. I've got a directory here. My Azure Directory. Okay, so let's go to Azure Active Directory. So Azure Active Directory, and in here we've got. Oops, let me zoom this out a little bit. In here we've got app registrations. So let's say we've created an app. Let's go create a new one, and we'll call this Super Expenses. Right. So we've got our Super Expenses app. And this is what this question is. So you notice we've got single tenant and multi-tenant here. This question really comes down, is really exactly what we just talked about. So we want accounts in any org to be able to use this. You also have the option to use multi-tenancy plus the entire world of personal accounts. If you want somebody to be able to sign in with their Hotmail account or their Outlook or Xbox or whatever, you can also enable that too. We won't worry about that for today. Because I don't know if noobslayer26 at hotmail.com necessarily would have any expenses that they need to report. So anyway, so we're going to choose accounts in any organizational directory, which makes this app multi-tenant. So this is the equivalent of checking the box or setting the flag that says this application is multi-tenant. You can always do this after the app is created. You don't have to do it right now, right? Everything else is the same. So you still set a redirect URI. You still set where your app's going to live and where you're going to get processed after the fact. So we'll just set this one to our JWT inspection tool so we can go see what happens. Yeah, I don't know, Bolt. I took a guess that was your name. Are you 26 and is Robertable's 25? Who came first in terms of which Noob Slayer was first? Okay, so we've got our application. It has an app ID. And this is what we're going to put into, this is what we would put into our configuration in our app. It says up here, supported account types is multi-org. So multi-org means multi-tenant. And from this point on, it's really just sort of a standard. There's really nothing too wild about this. It's just a normal application. So if we want to go try to sign into this app, we're going to need this client ID, and we're going to go do it. If we want to add permissions, we add permissions the same way that we would normally. So we look for permission, we go to the graph, and we might say, hey, I want to get user permissions for, files.read, for example. And so here's files.read to read a user's files. We'll go ahead and add that one because why not? And it says successfully save permissions for super expenses, whatever, right? So now I can sign into this app because I'm in this directory, of course, and so I can go and sign in. So let's go sign in. I wish we had a test button. That would make this much easier. So let's go get signed in here. So I'm just going to sign in. Let's see, we'll give it a scope of OpenID. I'll put this URL down here so we can see this all in a minute. So let's look at this URL. This is just a normal sign-in URL. So we're going to sign in. We're going to use sign in to my tenant only because I'm just signing in for me. And we've got a client ID here, which is our application ID that we just created. We want to get an ID token back, and the only scope we need right now is OpenID. We just want to sign the user in. We don't want to do anything else. The one thing we do have to change is instead of it being my tenant specifically, we're going to change this to be common. So this is almost identical to the kind of call your app would send a user to. And most of the libraries handle doing this for you, but essentially we're going to go to common, and by using common, we're going to say anybody from any directory can sign in. So let's put this in up here. And oops, oh, we got to go turn on. I have to go turn on implicit because I forgot again, as usual. So turn that back on. Okay. So we're going to go to that URL. I guess I better do it in a private window. So we're going to get over here to this URL. And you'll notice there's no branding. So it doesn't have my wallpaper. It doesn't have my company logo. It doesn't have anything here, right? So I'm going to type in my username. And now my branding does appear because now we know who the user is, and so we can change the branding to look like their organization. And so now I'm sort of in my orgs. I'm back in my org, and so I can sign in with a security key. I'm just going to use my password for the moment. I'm going to have to do MFA because I have to do MFA in my org. So my org is going to ask me to do MFA. I do MFA, and now we get a typical sort of a normal consent screen. We want to view our profile and maintain access to data. Cool. We didn't ask for anything else. That's all we need. And now if we look at our response, here's our ISS that we looked at earlier, the issuer claim, and it's login at microsoftonline.com. And here's my tenant's identifier. So that's my tenant GUID, right? 98A34A88. You'll also see this TID claim, and the TID claim is what's going to come in to tell you what tenant it's a member of, right? So this tenant here is the same as the issuer because that's who issued this token. That's who said this is the token for this user, and I can sign this and support that, and you can go back and verify it. So this tenant ID, this is the thing that you use in your app to say this user's a member of organization 123. Okay. So now let's go do this again, but instead I'm going to sign in with a completely different organization. So I'm going to so I go back to the common endpoint, which common again has no branding, doesn't know who we are. And I'm going to use another account, and this is Sue, and Sue works at the East US 3 Corporation. And so now, of course, now that I've typed in the username of Sue at eastus3.com, we see it says, oh, the branding is different. The branding is specific for Sue's organization. It's got her company's logo, and it's got their background and their little note to their employees or whatever. So now Sue's going to sign in, and if Sue has a requirement for MFA or something, then Sue's going to have to fulfill that. If Sue can remember her password, then we'll get in quickly. And so again, now we see the same screen. So Sue's going to have to consent. She's going to say, yep, these are things that I want to do. Cool. I want to let this app read my profile, and we'll let this app keep access to the data that it's got. You'll notice it says unverified under here, and we'll come back to that later. So Sue's going to accept this, and now Sue's going to get signed in. So now we're back at your application, right? Now, note the issuer is different because this GUID is not the GUID that we had a moment ago, right? It also means that the tenant ID claim is also different. So this key, this is the driving key for your app to choose. Oh, this is this is a thing that this means that Sue's a member of this other organization. Thus, I need to show the correct data to Sue based on her organizational membership, and we can drive that from here, so you don't have to do that on your own. So let's go look at Sue's organizational membership administration, right? So let's go play Sue's admin for a minute. Let me get over here to get to an actual window that I can use. So let's go to the Azure portal, portal.azure.com, and I'm going to go to eastus3.com, which is Sue's directory, Sue's tenant. So I am now Sue's administrator. We go over here to Azure Active Directory. And it won't be in our app registrations. So if we go look at our application registrations, it won't be in here because it's not an application that we registered. It's an application that we're using as a customer, but it's not an app that we registered. So if we look at all the apps in this tenant, there's only one. But if we come to enterprise applications, this is where we're going to see more. Okay, so here's our super expenses app. Now, enterprise applications in Azure AD, there are all sorts of things you can add here. So let's go browse the gallery. You want to sign into AWS or GCP or Oracle platforms with your Azure AD account, this is where your administrator set that up. You want to do single sign-on. You want to do it with Slack. If you want to do it with, I don't know, Blackbaud, like, I don't know, whatever you want to sign into, if it's a large enterprisey thing, ServiceNow, I think, is in here. ServiceNow, like that? Yeah, so ServiceNow, like user voice, all sorts of different services exist that you can use to sign in with. AWS Client VPN. So that's what an enterprise app is. It's not necessarily an app you built, but it's an app that your organization uses. And so because Sue signed into Super Expenses also shows up as an app that's listed. And because I'm Sue's administrator, now we can do things like assign users to it. So Sue's in, and Sue's got default access because we don't have any roles. But let's say we're like, cool, Sue can use this, but we don't want anybody using this unless we don't want anybody to use this unless they're assigned. So we'll change this, for example, to user assignment required. So by saying user assignment required, we're saying nobody can sign in without being assigned to this application through users and groups. We can also just turn off sign in. So we might say, you know what, we don't want people using it because we got to go through security review before we just let anybody start using this app. So we want to turn off sign in entirely. So that's going to block users entirely. The logo and homepage and all that, we'll go look at that here in a minute. But so we can do things like force user assignment required. And then we can also hide it. So if we don't want the user to know that it's there or know that it's available, we can hide it from them so they can't see it. It also means we have things like conditional access policy. And apparently my trial has expired, so I can't. Oh, this one never had it. But anyway, conditional access is what drives things like MFA. So if we want to say you're only available, you can only sign into this app when you're using. Sure, why not? I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? So, I guess I've already used it before, so I can't do it again. Anyway, if we wanted to set conditional access policies that say you can sign in, but only if you MFA and only if you're coming from a corporate network with a known IP range, we can set that. And I get to set that as Sue's administrator, not the super expenses administrator who built the app, right? And so everything here feels to me as an admin that's very familiar. Let's see, we got a question. Would the user assignment required being set to no be the same as assigning the built-in all users group to the app? In effect, yes. In the sense that any user would be able to sign in if they're a member of that all users group. Like if for some reason the built-in all users group was lagging behind and didn't have users in it at the correct time, then they would be blocked if you would set it into all users. But yes, it is essentially the same as saying all users. Anybody can sign in to this app. Actually, it's probably even better to, instead of saying all users, it's probably best to call them authenticated users, because any user who can authenticate to your directory can access that application. Now, when they get to the app may say, well, cool, you signed in, but I don't know who you are, and I don't have any data to show you or something like that. But you'll still be able to sign in Azure AD side. So assigning users, if we were to come in here and try to assign all users, of course that's premium things, I don't have it in this one. If we tried to assign all users, it would essentially be the same provided all of your users in your directory are in that group. The reason for that differentiation is that there's also this other thing that gets used a lot in Azure AD called B2B, or Azure AD business-to-business B2B collaboration, sometimes it's called. B2B lets you invite users in to come and work with you in your apps, in your corporate stuff, right? Good morning, Vicious. Good to see you again. Christos had to run because his house is flooding or whatever, right? And then JP Flick, no, so none of the enterprise app stuff is exposed for B2C. So B2C apps can't do this directly, although there is some neat stuff you can do when you combine B2C with multi-tenancy in a sort of in an unholy matrimony, I guess, where you use B2C as an use multi-tenancy in Azure AD as an identity provider to B2C, and that way you cover both all of the Azure Active Directory users in the world, but then also users who don't have Azure Active Directory who want to use your app. So you can get this kind of functionality sort of with B2C, but not directly in B2C. So my administrator, I'm Sue's administrator. I can come in here and make changes. We see things like the audit logs. We see who signed in. We can push user accounts over to the app if the other app supports that. Like, there's a bunch of neat stuff you can do in things like provisioning. So most applications that we see, most of them do sort of a just-in-time thing where a user has arrived at the app. The app says, hey, I see you're a member of this org, but I don't necessarily know who you are yet. So I'm going to sign you in, and then an administrator needs to give you permission, or maybe the administrator puts you into a specific role, or maybe you can see basic data by virtue of your membership in an organization. There's also something called SCIM, which is a protocol, sort of a standard for pushing user data over. So you can use SCIM. You can implement SCIM on the developer side in your app to receive user data. And then Azure AD will support SCIM for pushing user data from the directory to your application so that users get pre-populated. So you can pre-populate your user database based on SCIM data that gets pushed over, which, especially for older apps, that tends to work better, or for apps that have a really involved authorization system or a really involved hierarchy, pushing the users over up front can make it easier for the apps to work, or in some cases for them to work at all. And so you can use things like SCIM for doing that. But as the admin, you have control over what data you push, who can sign in, under what conditions they can sign in, and then you can go back and see who has signed in. So you get all the logs and all that sort of stuff that you would get normally. So I'm going to delete this app for a moment because we want Sue's going to come back to it a little bit later on. So let's go back to our main app registration. So now I'm back as me, back as the developer of the super expenses app, right? So we have this thing called app roles. Now we haven't added any app roles yet. So let's go create one, and we'll call this admins, and we'll let users sign in, and we'll just call the value admin, and admins can have carte blanche access to the app and the app's data, to the app for the organization. And we're going to enable that. So we're going to say, yep, we want that. So we want to enable this one. And let's create another one, and we'll call this auditor. And an auditor has read access to all app data. And we'll create one new one, and we'll call this one a limited user, and we'll call them limited user. Limited user, and limited users can only see public data. Whatever whatever you want them to be. The value is what's going to come back in the claim. So the value is going to be the thing that you use to determine what they can and can't do. So we've created these three roles, and let's go look in my enterprise applications. And we'll also see it in here. So super expenses. And here is where we can assign users and groups. So I can assign a user. So I've already signed in. So I've got default access. Let's add another user. And I'll add this user. And we'll pick a role for that user, and we'll call this user admin. So we'll assign the administrative role. And so you can be a member of multiple roles by this. So if we wanted to also be a member of a different role, we could choose the same user and make them an auditor too. Although in our specific case, that doesn't make a ton of sense because the two are on top of each other, but whatever. So instead, since I'm going to use my main account, let's pick this, and I will be an admin here. Select, assign. Now you can also assign groups. If you have Azure Active Directory Premium, it's like a P1 or P2 feature. You can also assign groups into a role, which is super, super helpful. The one thing about groups, at least as of today, is that you have to be a top-level member of a group for that role membership to work. So if you're a member of a group that's 5 groups nested down into a group, you're not going to confer that access. You will if you are a top-level member of a group. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So I've given myself this admin access, right? So let's go sign in again. And because I'm already signed into the browser, I'm SSO'd in. But you'll notice now I have a role, right? So that's cool. So I've got my role. And so now if you're using, like, for example, ASP.NET, ASP.NET will pick this up, and you can just use the authorize tag to make that work. Other frameworks have ways to map well-known claims in, and we'll get around to that on a different day. So let's go sign in now as Sue. So Sue's going to go and sign in. Sue isn't a member of any roles yet, right? So Sue doesn't have any roles. So let's go look at assigning Sue some roles. So now I'm back as Sue's administrator. Or no, sorry. I'm not a Sue's administrator. Or am I? Yeah, I am. East US 3 Corp. So I'm back here in as Sue's administrator. And let's go look at our enterprise apps. And here's our super expenses app. And now we say, yeah, we want Sue to be we want Sue to have a role. So now you'll notice my other assignments aren't here because they're two totally separate organizations. So let's pick Sue again. And Sue, oh, I guess my roles haven't come over yet, so I have to give it a second. But so Sue right now has default access, and in another minute or two, these roles should sync up, and we should be able to add her. So now the administrator has the ability, the other administrator for the other company has the ability to add users into roles on their side in their organization, as opposed to calling a help desk and saying, "Hey, I need you to add Sue to role 456," which means you don't have to handle those sorts of things yourself. We'll see if it's come back up yet. Doesn't look like it, not yet. You don't have to handle those things yourself. That's all. You're asking your administrators to go to do that for themselves, for their own customers. That does it only for themselves, which is kind of cool. There's one other thing to look at in here, and then we got a bunch of code that sort of outlines how to do different things and how to sort through all these different things, especially for signing in. In .NET, Microsoft.Identity.Web handles all of it for you. You don't do anything differently than you would if you were building a normal app. I'm going to check this one more time to see if it's come over yet. Nope, not yet. So that's okay. We'll come back around to it later on. The one other thing you may have noticed is that it said it was unverified when we signed in. And that's a new thing that's sort of coming around. And that new thing is a way for an app developer, say you building an app to go and sell to people or whatever, that's a way for you to make your apps show up as verified and have a little checkbox like your Twitter verified or whatever. And what that means is that we have verified that the company who published that app is the company, the names are the same, and that they're an actual business. Doesn't really vouch for necessarily the overall safety of the app, but it does mean that the business who says that they published this application is the one who actually published it, and that they're a member of the Microsoft Partner Program, which requires some extra hoops to jump through. So, in our app registration for our app, we'll go back to our super expenses over here, and we're going to actually have somebody come over and talk about publisher verification in depth here in the next few weeks, a few weeks after Christmas, I should say. If we look at our app, you'll notice we haven't given it a logo. We can upload. We can pick a logo that we want to upload. I don't know what sort of possibly offensive things are in here, but here we'll use this one. So we'll upload. So now we have a logo for our app. We need to give it. We can give it a home page if we want, and this is just somewhere for people to go. And this is all going to show up in the sign-in page, and things like privacy statements, right? So it says publisher domain will show unverified, and the whole thing about unverified apps is that you can imagine the risk, right? Let's say somebody goes and creates a multi-tenant app, and instead of calling it super expenses, they call it Office 365. No, really, we promise it's Office 365. Like that would be that has a lot of risk. And so instead, and people could, just the same way that people register PAI.com and stuff like that. And so because that's where publisher verification, all that sort of thing started to come from. So we'll pick a domain that's been verified in my tenant. I guess we'll just use this one. We'll save that one up. And so the domain's going to show up. I'm not technically I'm not going to be considered verified at this point because I haven't gone through Microsoft Partner Network verification and done all that sort of stuff. I haven't done any of that. And that's what this is. So it requires an ID in order to go and be a verified publisher. And a lot of that's because the verification that MPN goes through is obviously fair. I don't want to call it super rigorous per se, but it makes sure you're a business entity and that you can receive payments and that sort of thing. And so by going through that process, we can make sure that you've done whatever. And then once you do that, since I don't have a badge I can show you, once you do that, you get this nice little blue checkbox next to your name that says, "Oh, hey, this is definitely Contoso who published this because we verified our fictitious company," right? So this is what will show up the next time a user goes and tries to sign in. Okay, I'm gonna go try Sue one more time because I'm probably perseverating on this a little bit too much, but whatever. I'm fairly curious. I want to see this work. So let's get back over to East US 3. We'll give this a hard refresh and see what we get. Let's see. Super expenses. Have my rolls come over yet? I hope so. Let's see. Still not. Okay. So it's probably going to take a little bit longer than I expected. But at any rate, the next time we go to try to sign into this app, we should see at least our new photo changes and whatever. So we'll do Sue at eastus3.com. Oh, we're not going to see a consent screen because we are not asking for consent. So let's do this one instead. So Sue at eastus3.com. Get signed in here if I can remember the password correctly. And now it says, hey, this app might be risky because I'm unverified. And it says, if you trust this, then ask your admin to grant access. So now, because this app is asking for extra permissions and because it is unverified, I can't even sign in anymore as a user. So because me as the developer of this app, because I haven't gone through publisher verification, other people can't use my app. Okay. So code side, let me pull. Actually, let me just pull up. We'll just do a brand new app because why not, right? So on the code side, if you're using .NET 3.1 or higher, identity.web handles the vast majority of this work for you. The hardest part is the issuer validation, to be able to know that the user who came in with issuer 123 maps to your internal database org 456. So let's just do a new. We'll do a new one. We'll call it multitenant MIW for Microsoft.identity.web. And we'll zoom this in a little bit more. Oops. Zigged when I should have zagged. Okay, so we'll do a .NET new. .NET New MVC auth multi-org, I believe, is the correct one. Maybe different. Let's see. Okay, so let's get this open. And that wasn't the right folder anyway, so that's going to cause some problems. Let's go multi-tenant. MIW, there we go. .NET New MVC auth. Actually, let's look at this first. Help. It is, for auth, it is multi-org. Okay, good. All right. So we're going to do multi-org. And if we open it up, we can take a look at this code here. Zoom in a little bit. So weird without Christos here. I guess we know who carries this place. Because he's definitely the entertaining one. Okay, so this is our boilerplate code. The template code that comes out of Microsoft.identity.web. Zoom in a little bit more. And the way that we use it is pretty much the same way that we use it otherwise. We've got add authentication with add Microsoft Identity Web App. It goes and gets the config. We've got a require authenticated user by default policy builder. And there's really not much that's much different from here on out. Everything about it is essentially the same. If we go look at our controllers, we've got a home controller. That's pretty normal. We'll let that update, I guess, in the background. I don't know what... Snooty. Wow. Restructured text. I don't know why that's there. It's kind of weird. We've got a home controller. There's nothing exciting here except for that we allow anonymous on air, and we have an authorized tag for forcing authorization or forcing sign-in to be at this page. So everything about this is pretty much exactly what you would expect. So let's go change this here. You'll notice the tenant ID in this case is common. So normally this would be your GUID, your jpd.ms, your domain name, whatever. Let's go put our app ID in of our super expenses app. And we'll just run it and see what we get. So where is our app ID? It's in our overview up here. So, oops, not that. We'll get our application ID. We're going to paste this in here in the client ID. Now let's run this and see what we get. We'll just do, I guess we'll do a build and just make sure we didn't put anything wrong in, but we didn't change any code. So if the template doesn't build straight up, then I guess we got a bigger problem on our hands. Okay, so let's do a .NET run. And this is, we're going to have to make one change to our application first, right? You'll notice our app URL is at localhost 5001, and our application, we haven't told Azure AD about this yet. So back in authentication, you'll notice the only redirect URI we have is the jwt.ms one. So let's go ahead and add localhost 5001 sign-in-OIDC. That's sort of the default one for ASP.NET. We'll save this. And let's get a private window. New in private window. And we'll go to localhost 5001. And now we're presented to sign in. And we have to sign in because we don't, because we haven't, we don't have any branding because we're hitting that common endpoint again. So the app has redirected us to go and sign in. My administrator has said, yeah, you got to sign in to use this app, so I'm going to approve it. Sure, stay signed in, whatever. And now we're at the app. And now we see this here, right? So let's take the same thing. I'm going to go use my corporate account, which won't work because Corp's not going to let me. But I guess that's the whole point. So let me get my corp window up here. So in this I'm signed in at work, right? So this is a work account. If I try to hit this app now, it's going to ask me to sign in. I'm going to go over to Microsoft. So you notice I got single signed on by virtue of the fact that I'm already signed into my PC or whatever. But we see it's my corporate account. It's an unverified app still because we haven't linked any of the stuff. We've got our silly photo and our name, and it says, hey, this app wants to sign you in. It wants to maintain access to that sign-in. And I'm going to say, that's cool, and I think Corp is going to block me. Maybe not. They change their policies all the time. They didn't. Cool, it works now. And so now you'll notice my application says, oh, hey, now we know who you are, right? So let's go make one more change to our app. If I can find my VS Code here. We're going to go do a really super quick and ugly thing here on index. We'll just do a new div down here, and we're just going to print my claims, right? So God, it's been so. I kind of actually I should have done this as Razor Pages because now I'm kind of like, wait a minute, what? So I guess I'll just put something in view bag. Let's see. We'll do system.security.claims.claim. So for each one of those, I'm just going to do a. I'll just do a P. This is so ugly. This is awful. And we'll do c.value. Let's see. I guess we want the whole thing here. We will do. I guess I could do an li, but whatever. C dot value dollar C dot type. So this will give us the type of the claim, and it will also give us the value of the claim. I don't know if string interpolation is going to work here because of the whole thing, but I guess there's one way to find out, right? Yeah, it looks like it might. Oh, I need a closing quote here. Okay. Don't know if this is going to work, but whatever. And then in our controller, I'll just go stuff the claims in there in home. So in our index action, we just need to set our viewbag.claims equal to user.identity.claims. Oops. User.identity. Or maybe it's just user.claims now. User.claims. Here we go. So we're just going to take our claims, and this should be okay. We're going to take this, and we're just going to stuff it in ViewBag because I'm lazy and don't feel like figuring out whatever the default standard method is that has 9,000 different derived types in order to make it work. And so we're just going to roll through that claims bag and show our claims in the app. So we'll do a .NET watch run this time. That way, I guess if I make changes again, we can come back and see it. So that's going to start running. And apparently I did something incorrectly. Build. I would expect a semicolon somewhere in here, but I don't know where. I do not. Oh, that's right. I do not. Thank you, Caparino. I do not need an at in there. Don't think I need a semicolon either. I wouldn't think that I would. Okay. .NET. Let's do a .NET build, and then I'm going to catch up on a couple questions here. There's some super annoying 8-bit music droning in the background. Is that on purpose? That's a good question. Let me see. We had a bunch of sound problems this morning, so we were a little bit late. So let me know if it's still there. And then, Sahil, good to hear that your token problem got sorted out. I like to hear that. So yeah, I still haven't really gotten any sort of hard confirmation on an actual upward token bound size. There are definitely problems with implicit in the sense that implicit has the risk of can only be whatever fits in the URL. And so those tokens, when you're doing them implicitly, they tend to be much smaller. And then Code with Sean went to Google something. It prompted me with a CAPTCHA and showed my IP. I'm on a VPN, changed city, and restarted streaming. Nice. And then these are the Surface earbuds, Big Ant Rod. They're okay. They work. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but in terms of earbuds that I can just stick in my ears, they tend to be fairly comfortable, and they sound good enough. I've got some Galaxy, what are these, Galaxy buds, and they're okay, but they like seal the ear and they hurt after a while, and these don't hurt, especially, which is especially good for what we're doing here. Okay, so I'm sure there's some collection of things that I have not considered here to make sure that I can use my statement here correctly. What am I missing? I guess the alternative is to do... Oh, you know, that's exactly what it is. It's a parenthesis. It is not a curly brace. At least, if nothing else, it'll get me a new error message. Thank you, Mr. Magoo. Okay, good. Now we're running. So we'll do a .NET watch run, and let's go see what happens. Let's go see what's in our. Well, we'll go see what's in our claims. And so this claim set, this is essentially where you determine what you can and can't do. So here we are. So now I'm signed in. We've got this big long thing here, which is mostly used by us privately, but we've got our name, so it shows my name. It shows my object identifier. So this is my object identifier that I can store in my database. So this is the thing to store in the database. It has my preferred username, so that's why that's what showed up here. We have the name identifier. This is another unique identifier for this application. And then we have tenant ID. So in the claim itself, it actually comes over as TID. So if you're using Node or something that's not .NET, or if you're parsing the tokens manually, which of course we wouldn't advise, they will come over in the TID claim. But when ASP.NET processes those claims, it snaps them to some standard ones that we're expecting. And so those standard ones end up with these long, somewhat comically ridiculous names that all have some sort of an underlying scheme or whatever around there. So anyway, that's why these names will come in. But so because these names are here, we've got them, which is cool, and we can you can use this to say, oh well, this user is a member of this organization. We go look this up in our database, and then we know, okay, cool, this is what the user can do. So if we open up the app in a different window, where I'm signed in as a different user, I'll just refresh it here. You'll notice everything looks pretty similar, except the tenant ID is different. And because I was assigned to that role, I'm also in the admin role. And again, this is one of these things that says identity claims role, whatever. So what's nice about the fact that these claims get processed is that now in our application, let's say we add a new, we'll just create a new, I'll just put a new method in here, and we'll call this, let's see, iActionResult, and we'll call it admin. And on here, we're going to do authorize. And we're going to make this only available for roles admin. And let's see, viewBag message. You are an admin. And we'll return a view. I'll go create a quick view here. We'll just copy index. We'll call this admin. And we'll put the message up here. Message. Cool. Okay. So now we've got now we have an admin page in here, right? And it's only available for users who have that admin. Now, this syntax can be used at the action level. It can also be used at the controller level. So in most cases, you'd have a big admin section of your app, and so you probably want to protect it that way. So let's try to go to admin with this user here. So this user is not in any sort of role. So if we just try to go to admin or home/admin, we'll get access denied. So we can't get in because we don't have that role. However, if we go to our other user who does have that role, we go to home/admin. Now, oh, something blew up. Did I ever add my thing in there? Maybe I didn't. Oh, I never added my claim set. Of course. So we'll put this in here too. This is why you shouldn't use viewBag. All right, rebuild. So we get access denied by virtue of the not having the role. For my normal user, and then for my admin user who's in the role, we are an admin. And so that's happening with the home/admin over here. Okay. And so that's sort of it. You don't have to do a whole lot. You can go look at the tenant ID claim and say, oh, you're an admin and you're a member of blah, 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 and I have you in my database. At this point, it just becomes a sort of a normal data filtering kind of a thing. But what's cool about it is that your application doesn't have to be tailored specifically to any specific tenant, and a user doesn't have to choose. We've seen some apps where it says, hey, what account do you want to sign in with? And here's a 400 item drop down list where they have to go choose choose which organization they're a member of. So you don't have to do any of that. And if you want to go access users data with that, you can do that as well. And all of this comes out of the template, so we didn't even have to do any extra work. There's one thing that's in the template that is quite interesting to look at. And it's in the repository. So Microsoft identity.web in the repo for identity.web, which is of course out in GitHub. Of course, GitHub has a nice, neat dark mode now, which is kind of cool. In the identity.web source, there is something called authority. Is it the authority helper, I believe? No, that's not the right one. There is one in here that handles verifying all of the verifying the issuer is correct when you get when you have lots and lots of different potential issuers. Is it this one, I think? No. Essentially, though, because this is OpenID compliant, you can at any point go to login.microsoftonline.com, and you can ask for what's called the well-known endpoints, right? So it's well-known /OpenID configuration, and a lot of apps and things that you may use to get this connected. If you want to add, sign in to something else, vendor software or some package off the shelf or something like that. If you want to use that, a lot of times it'll say, "Hey, well, what's your OpenID Connect metadata?" or "What's your metadata endpoint?" You'll hear that asked a lot when you're trying to integrate this with other things. And it's a well-known URL. It's part of the spec, and so where it ends up is your tenant name, not with OAuth 2 in there, just v2.0, and then .wellknown /OpenID configuration. Virtually every OpenID provider on the internet has this same. They all follow the same format, which makes it easy to use. The data that comes out of there is this, and there are lots of different things, but things like the token endpoint and where you can get the keys and all sorts of what is supported for doing. But the important one, or one of the important pieces in here, is the issuer. So this value is the value that your code is going to check against to say, is this an app that I trust, or did this token come from a source that I trust and that I believe in, right? In a single tenant app, no sweat. Because single tenant apps are always going to come from the same issuer, and you're going to know the issuer because your app only knows the one issuer. So it's the only thing it has to check in terms of issuers. The only one it has to check is this my own, right? So because we have this parameter in here, we can say, oh, cool, we'll just use this. And this is what .NET and virtually every other sort of mainline package uses for doing token validation to make sure the token's cool. The problem is when we use this with common. So if we change out, instead of using my domain name, if we change this out to common, so we end up with a URL that looks like this. When we go to the same URL, most of the things have changed. Look who's back! I'm glad you're back. I'm so excited you're back.
Man, $500 later, I am back.
Well, you seem a lot drier.
I did not have to mess with the water. That's why I'm paying somebody else to do the hard work for me. delegating. Oh man, I've missed so many things. What's happening? People are asking for me. I'm back. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sahil, for the concern. What did I miss?
Thank God. Thank God he's back. This guy's so dry and boring.
It's been 1 hour with Christos making noise. That's good.
I know.
Peace and quiet, right?
Anyway, I was talking about issuers. I was actually just about to go take a break because my teeth are floating, so good timing.
Do you want me to take over and do some stand-up while you're away? Educate our audience?
I have one thought to complete, and then we can move on.
Very nice.
So we look at the issuer for common, the common issuer. You'll notice that tenant ID is this token thing. It's just got curly braces around it. So the reason for that, of course, is that the tenant ID will be replaced by whatever the user signs in with. Of course, the problem with that is most libraries are just like, okay, well, this is the string that I'm looking for, and this string will never exist in an actual token because curly brace tenant ID curly brace is not going to ever be issued in one of our tokens. So the one extra thing that you have to do, or the one extra thing that we do for you in the case of .NET, is when you look at this, it's one of those things we have to know that it's templated. And that happens here. I'll see if it's... I hear myself, Christos. Do you have me on speaker or something? We'll see if this is in here anywhere. Just check. But there is an issuer. Here we go. The AAD issuer validator.cs. Let's put this to main branch. Cool. Okay. And if we look in here, this issuer validator, this is the thing that goes and handles, what kind of token did I get back, and does it match a pattern? It's essentially what you want it to do. We have to match, hey, does the issuer that we receive match the pattern that we were expecting? And luckily we've written all this for you. So there's this isValid method here. Let's go down here to this. And isValid issuer essentially is just doing a string replace on tenant ID with a tenant ID. And if it matches, then it goes through a couple different checks, but is there a valid tenant ID? Is there a known list? So you can provide a list of valid tenants and say, hey, I only want my org and these 7 other orgs to be able to sign in. So I want to do multi-tenant, but I don't want anybody on Earth to be able to get to it, just me and 50 of my friends or whatever. You could look this up in a database. There are all sorts of different ways you could do this. But that's what this validator does, a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And if you wanted to write your own because you wanted to look them up in a database or do different things, this place is a good place to start to go and have to build your own. This is probably one of the more important parts of validating the common issuer. So. But yes, that's part of identity.web. So identity.web does it for you, and you don't even have to sweat it. But if you have more specific requirements, or you want to have more flexibility with what issuers you trust and which ones you don't, because like we said earlier, you're going to be getting them from virtually anybody. This is a good template or a good place to start going in and implementing your own. Now I just did like a template.NET new with multi-org instead of single org, and we added in some roles and stuff. It was nothing like, we didn't have to write a bunch of code. I wrote like 3 lines of code, and most of those were figuring out if I should use parentheses or curly braces.
Nice.
Which, if it wasn't for Mr. Magoo, I would have still been sitting here like, why isn't my curly brace working? Anyway, so the other thing, I don't know if we're gonna have time to do it today. I don't even know if we want to do it today. They tell us that everybody has to build a bot to be on Twitch, and rather than building a bot, I was just gonna fork the bot that Layla built and add on some special stuff for us, and so we can do that. Which I need to do it before Friday. Is really what it comes down to. So do you want to do that now, or do you want to do something different? What do you think, Christos?
It's totally up to you, my friend. We have an hour and 15 minutes. We can kick it off if you want to, or we can do it offline. It's maybe the audience can let us know what they would like to see.
Well, but let's go take a quick.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we're back. So we only got a little bit. I don't know, maybe an hour.
We are back.
Yeah, we're back. Okay. So I got two people have graciously offered up their bots for us to fork. One is our good friend Vicious, who's in the chat. So shout out to Vicious. Go check him out. I wonder if I did. I think I got our thing set up so we can do this. We did, yeah. So go check out Vicious. But so he hooked us up with his chatbot, and then Layla also did that. She also sent us hers and said, "Hey, you should go give it a shot." And the reason for that, of course, is that we're trying to get our channel points and stuff set up so that you can do some fun stuff. The problem is I'm still trying to figure out the channel points sort of API and all that sort of stuff. So, and in addition to that, more importantly, what's interesting about that is it seems like IRC is still like one of the more common mechanisms for building chatbots. Is to use IRC.
Wow.
So a couple of weeks ago, I was messing around with this, and we made an IRC thing, but that seems kind of, I don't know, it seems kind of old school. So I'm more curious, less in the code and more about how do we build this bot? Like all of the Twitch docs talk about chatbots with IRC. Which
talking about blast from the past.
Yeah,
Love it.
And it worked, right? Like I could connect to the channel and do different things. The token stuff, since everything's OAuth, like I feel like of all of the things in this, the one thing that you and I are equipped to figure out is the authentication piece. The rest of it, I'm not too sure about. So, on the one hand, it seems like we almost need to connect with IRC from .NET. So we connect in as the bot, and then we can read commands and whatever. But if we come and look at the various bits of code that people have graciously shared with us,
Yep.
I don't actually see a whole lot in here about IRC. Let's see.
So is there a different way to emit messages from code?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And so let's see. If we look in here and look at IRC
service.
So Layla's doesn't have any IRC. We'll look for like a TCP client, since that might be one way to do it, or like a socket.
And I assume that the IRC will be used when somebody does ! Whatever. Like you've done,
essentially,
no?
yeah. I mean, essentially the bot, right? The bot can read all the chat code, and
is there any reason why we have to write our own and not use stream elements?
I don't think Stream Elements has any of the channel point stuff implemented yet.
I see.
But I also don't know. I also don't think that that's necessarily a bot itself that does the channel point work. It's like the thing let's see. That is. It's in here somewhere. Let's look for channel points. So essentially, we want. This is what we want. We want to do redemptions. But we also want to have the normal one, right? So we still want to have the thing where people can type whatever and see different things.
Exactly.
It's the point redemption thing, and it looks like, based on what I could tell, it looks like essentially someone redeems channel points for something, right? And it essentially enters into this like unfulfilled or not yet or unfulfilled queue, and so you and I need to pull the queue and look for those things that are yet to be done, or look for those channel point redemptions that are yet to be fulfilled, and then fulfill them and mark them as fulfilled. So what I'm curious about is how we actually get a subscription to that. That's one thing. And once we get that subscription, how do we do things with it? You know what I mean? So a user has redeemed channel points. That's the subscription that we want. So it looks like we're in this event sub. Thing. It seems like it makes sense to me, and I could be wrong. Seems to me like we'd want we'd probably just use a webhook, right?
Yep.
And the webhook would call a function, and the function would figure out what to do.
Correct.
Send a note on a queue down to my machine to toggle something on my machine, or to call some other service that makes something dance on the screen. I don't know, whatever.
Make somebody dance on the screen. Be careful what you say there. Be careful.
Yeah, so it looks like this is the one we want. A viewer has redeemed a custom channel points reward on the specified channel.
Nice.
So that's the one side of what we need to receive. And then on the other side, we need to do the redemption update. So redemption...
Yeah.
So I don't know what the difference is between the two, but we'll go look. So...
does the update probably update the... so the ad will send a message that somebody has redeemed 500 points. The update will be taking 500 points off somebody's tally. So if I redeem them, then you get a notification that I've just redeemed 500, and then at the back of that I get a, hey, your redemption was successful. You're down 500 points now.
I think, yeah, I mean, we don't directly decrement ourselves, but we do say that we fulfilled it, which I'm sure causes a bunch of other things to happen, and then one of those things being the points are actually deducted. I think, right? So it looks like the custom reward redemption ad essentially adds that to a queue, right? Or to a list. Maybe a queue is the wrong term to use here. So we have this collection of redemptions, and those get added with .add, right? And that is probably going to call a webhook to something like a function, like an Azure function.
We'll do that meaningful.
That's going to do some stuff. And then what the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go and do, it looks like, is it redemption update perhaps? Or maybe it's reward update. Oh, no. Channel points rewards is updated. So it must be a redemption. So this sends a notification when a redemption of a channel points custom reward has been updated for the specified channel. That says virtually nothing.
Can we see from Lila's or Vicious's bot how they deal with points at all?
Well, I haven't actually seen that in anybody's.
But surely there are people that are redeeming. Oh, you know what? They have the exclamation mark, whatever, but I don't think that's a redemption. That's just a bot doing something.
So they are in Vicious's. And they are... Look, I don't see anything on a cursory view. I don't see one in... I don't see one in Layla's. So let's look. So this is for growing and shrinking things, which is cool. So this is channel redemption status. And my assumption becomes that update is the thing that we use to say, hey, we've fulfilled the thing that we needed to fulfill. So that's what this update channel redemption status does, right?
Yep.
And then it has the redemption ID, the reward, and then so this one sets the status to canceled. I see. So you set the status to fulfilled. So let's go see what that does. Okay, update channel redemption status. And update channel redemption status. Good. So this has stuff in there like the broadcaster ID and things, which are obviously settings that we're going to have to set ourselves. But it's just an HTTP patch that says, yeah, this happened. We have an access token. We set the status. So we're just patching the status. So that's cool. And then it looks like he's also... Is that
access token coming from a config file? Does that mean that the access token is stored in... That's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't fully figured out what their OAuth flows look like either, because it looks like some of these access tokens are extremely long-lived. So I don't know. We're going to have to dig into that first, I think, before anything. Although this, well, see, yeah, that's the thing. Like, in order to do an event subscription, our code's going to have to do that subscription to start, right? Yes, AZ Wildfire. Are we going to require MFA to use channel points? Possibly. And are we going to call them ID tokens? I don't know. We'll take a vote. You can call them whatever you want. You tell us what you want us to call them, but, you know, I mean, you can call them claims. You can earn some custom channel claims. If that makes any sense. So, okay. So we have to have an app access token in all API requests. You do not need to include a user access token, even for subscriptions that require user authorization, because Twitch checks authorization throughout the lifetime of your subscription by calling Twitch's internal systems directly. Okay. So we make a post to subscriptions with some subscription data, right? It has to be 443, etc., etc. Okay. So then it calls for a verification, which is cool. Okay. So then, because this is app only, I'm assuming, because it's an app access token, I'm assuming, and this is a big assumption, that getting that's just a typical client credential flow, right? So if an app access tokens expire after 60 days. Wow.
Yeah.
So let's see. So, okay. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is that straightforward. Yeah, it's an app access token. It's client credentials. That couldn't. Honestly, it couldn't be easier. So now we need an app. So let's see. What is that? Dev.twitch.tv. Console. So we've got the bot, right?
Yeah.
So I am not a robot, as he says to the page all about robots. So let me grab this client ID.
That's what a robot would say.
It's exactly. It sounds exactly like what a robot would say. Let me put this in a note here. Okay, so I got my note. Okay. Cool. Okay. So I've got that. I've already got a secret save, so still got that. But what it seems like it means is that really what we're going to do is set a subscription. We're going to send in the subscription, right? We're going to get an access token. We're going to send in a subscription request, like essentially creating a new subscription. So this creation here. Since we're going to do a webhook with a callback, we are going to create the subscription. Yep. And then our function or our whatever is going to, something's going to need to be listening to our callback. And then we need to send back a verification.
Ooh, okay.
So it's expecting a verification to come back. So then they're going to post that to us with a bunch of header data and challenge data. And then we are going to send it back. So return the value of challenge from the callback verification to complete the verification process. Must be a raw string. If your server is using a web framework, be careful your web framework isn't modifying the response in an incompatible way. Okay, cool. And then we'll just get a webhook whenever something happens. That seems pretty. It seems pretty straightforward. Right?
Yeah, basic steps. Yeah.
What do you think?
I would say let's start by getting to the point that we can get notification into, or getting the point that our function gets called or whatever, right? Lila is rating us.
Hey, Layla.
Sweet.
Thanks. Hey, we're building a
a bot.
Christos always gives me a hard time about this when I say we should do a bot. He's like, let's just use somebody else's. So, you know. Of course, we could always.
Why reinvent the wheel?
I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I want to understand the wheel, so I have to reinvent it to understand it. Then we'll switch to somebody else's much better wheel. So, thanks for coming, Layla. And yeah, we're actually talking about bots, and more importantly, the biggest part I'm trying to figure out is channel point redemption. So that's going to be interesting. And I have yours, and I have to figure out, like, the thing I noticed is there's a lot of talk of IRC, and I'm like, IRC? Like, what year is it, you know? But apparently that's what people do. That's what Twitch bots do, is they connect with IRC. I don't know. We'll have to go look at the code that you shared with us. But anyway, thanks for coming. So earlier we talked about multi-tenancy. Christos had plumbing issues, so he was up to his eyeballs in plumbing problems, so he was gone for a while. And now
house plumbing issues, not physical plumbing issues. In case people are wondering, right? Let's be specific. The house was leaking, not me. So the plumber was here this morning, and I had to ditch JP for 45 minutes. I even had to go to the bank, man. I mean, I haven't been in the bank in a year. I had to go to the bank.
Yeah.
What
So
plumber
the
doesn't
bank.
take Zello?
Why'd you have to go to the bank anyway?
Because you need the cash. Yeah.
So we so Silicon Orchid. We're probably going to use a wrapper. Although sometimes it seems like the wrappers are harder to get started with than just making raw API calls.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's the plan. We're going to try to use a wrapper, and then
And there's an SDK. Is there an SDK?
yeah, there's Twitch lib. That seems to be I've seen that one a couple times. So, and then Nick, the first one says you can connect with MIRC. You can connect to any Twitch chat, which would be great if the 425 bot goes sideways and just starts plowing through a bunch of other people's chats and whatever. But
That's
Yeah,
that's what Lila says. You need to use Twitch Lib is the way to go.
okay.
And same for Silicon Orchid. Thank you.
And then she also
We have
says
a
we
fellow
need to use pub sub for channel point redemption, which is what it looks like. So, and Sahil, no, we will be here. We're going to be back on Friday for our holiday show, and then we are going to be off for the last 2 weeks of the year. So after Friday, we will be back on January 4th.
4th.
Is it 4th?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Monday.
who's coming on the 4th?
I think we are flying solo on the 4th. It's our first stream of the year. I thought it would be nice to be just the two of us without any plumbing issues. But let me check because our awesome team member Hannah may have booked something. Bromance, yeah, man. What's a bromance? On the 4th, do we have anyone? No, we have no guests, so we're good.
Cool.
The two of us,
All right.
we're probably gonna be building something fun as well.
So the one thing I want to do before we end today
Uh-huh.
is create a subscription and start listening for that subscription, because I actually have some pretty interesting channel point rewards in mind, which I haven't told you about yet either. And I'd like for them to be ready by Friday. So
Very nice.
if I can get this going, because tomorrow we've got to do a show and that time of year everything's busy. So if I don't get it done now, I won't get it done at all. So let's do a funk new, or I guess
Before you do your funk new, Bruce Lane 06 is asking, how do you get these nice Git notifications and the blue thing on your terminal? It's a PowerShell extension, right?
Yeah, so I'm using.
There's a blog post by Scott Huntsman, in fact, that I used recently to set it all up.
Yeah, so there's Posh Git, which is sort of a PowerShell thing for Git, for interacting with Git from PowerShell. There's also, let's see, Hanselman.
Yeah, I found the link, so let me just put it in the chat.
He did a post on setting your terminal,
Yep.
setting your terminal all up. Yep. So
Fonts
he's got it.
and making it nice and looking nice and all
Yep.
my posts. So
Yep. Oh, my
I
Posh.
used
Yeah,
it.
that's probably the big one. Yep.
Although, does it work inside code? Because mine is a bit broken. Like the ligatures are missing and the end pointy arrows are missing. Does your VS
have to-
Code?
It does. You have to change the fonts. So, and you can change fonts specifically for terminal too.
Oh,
See, I'm a much bigger fan of Bash, of my Bash prompt. I think it's much better, but whatever.
Ooh,
I like
fine.
it because I don't know, but I don't whatever.
What do you use for your bash prompt?
Pretty
Maybe
much
we should do a stream on setting up your terminal. How
Pretty
about
much
that?
everything except for when we're doing .NET and Windows.
Oh no, as in what? How do you beautify your bash?
This is
not when do you use it.
This is oh my ZSH, and then
Thinning for that,
and
right?
then I added a bunch of new things like the weather from my temperature thing outside and whatever. So I was like, oh, is it cold? Is it raining? I don't want to go outside if it is, and I'll know if I'm right here. So
Right.
yeah. Anyway, okay.
Silicon Orchid says if you go down the path of using TwitchLib, he got stung by PubSub client. You need to be explicitly letting it know that you're listening to events.
So the thing I wonder about, so if I've got a socket sitting open, that's going to imply then I've got something that's living for a long time, which doesn't really fare well with stuff like functions, right?
Yeah.
So it seems to me like a webhook would be better, because at least with the webhook, my function could be down and could, dehydrate for the, the other 18 hours of the day that you and I aren't streaming. And I don't have to keep some long-lived socket connection up and running. But that could also be a gross misunderstanding of how the pub sub works. I mean, it looks like I could do it if I do a webhook as the transport. That the webhook transport is just going to be a call instead of it being an ongoing thing. I mean, we don't have to do it as a function. It could be whatever, right? I mean, we could do this as I'm happy to do it however. I can't rely on anything in my house to run continuously because I break things or, whatever. So, which is a me problem, and I completely accept that. I'm just saying, it could be whatever. It doesn't have to be a function. A function just is the first thing that comes to mind for me because it's easy. So, that's all. And yeah, like AZ Wildfire says, we do happen to have access to a cloud. But yeah, I don't want to run a VM all day. I mean, this thing we're like, we're going to do all this cool stuff, and we're going to build this cool thing that's going to, do channel point redemption and all this silliness and all this super cool, neat, new, brand new stuff. And then we're going to run the back end on a VM 735 hours a month. Those two things just don't jive with me. It feels like having, it feels like you're,
It is going to be a function. Yeah, AZ Wildfire,
Yeah.
we're adding a function. That's what we're saying. Not a container. No.
I mean, I guess we could put it in a container. If
Can you imagine running the stream for 2 years without ever touching containers? Can we go for that goal, right? Easily. Although we did do a stream on Kubernetes, didn't we? Yeah.
Well, we had somebody come in and do a stream on Kubernetes. Let's be super precise. Okay. All right, we're gonna do it. Okay.
Right, we're doing it.
All right, so I got to do a func init. I guess we'll do .NET because whatever.
Just do it and sip it. You're absolutely right, Yanisku. That's what we're doing.
All right, we've got 46 minutes. We're gonna make this happen today. So func
Easy. That's not even a challenge for us.
func init. Oh,
Func init. Have you done func init?
I did do a func init. So we're gonna do a new HTTP trigger, and I'm gonna call this.
Dude, zoom in, man. Come on, you should know by now.
Okay.
52 episodes.
I'm sorry. Is that water I hear leaking down your? I think you better. I'm just kidding.
Be careful what you wish for. My plumber will be back any minute. Make it bigger. Oh, actually, speak of the devil, I said plumber, and he turned out. Like, give me 1 minute to open the door.
Channel point shook, or is the channel point's hook? I guess it could be either one. Okay, so let's get this open and go look. Let's see what's going on. That's a good point too. Is I could just run the function locally. Like I've been running functions locally for a while on Raspberry Pis for controlling my light bulbs, so that my kids know when I'm in a meeting and they still promptly ignore. Okay. So, Twitch lib. That's the thing everybody says we need to use, right? Twitch lib. Okay. Let's go look at this and see what we get. Oh my. Okay. Docs, maybe? So there's the pub sub one, which looks like I looked at before. Okay.
And I'm back. There you go.
So Silicon Orchid tells us that doesn't seem to be a long-lived thing, which is cool. I'm a little concerned that this does have some socket silliness at play. So if I was to create a new why are these things like this? let's see. If I create a new subscription, so there's TCP client, a WebSocket client, and oh, Silicon Orchid has one on his GitHub too. Do you have a link, or is it just github.com/Silicon Orchid? Let's see.
He's not 100% on that. I noticed that things appear to stop after a long time. Could just be my rubbish code, and Lila confirms it is his rubbish code. That's not nice.
Which one's rubbish? Is it the Twitch bot or the amazing one? Is there two? I don't know which one is the one that does work and the one that doesn't. Twitch lib. This uses Lewis and EF Core. That's cool. Okay, it's an alternative version. Oh, this one was
try
created.
the regular.
All right, let's go look at the regular one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got the agent as a console app that runs locally. Commas common, EF repo manager, empty Razor project. Okay, so the agent. What's the agent? What is the function of the agent?
Something listening for something.
So this is chatbot connect. Okay.
Zoom in one tick, please.
Okay. Okay, so this has. So this is this.
That's
one
a lot
is
of sections there.
Well, the thing I'm worried with Twitch lib is that, I mean, maybe there's a way to set up a webhook when you create a new subscription. Surely there's a way. I would hope there's a way to create a webhook when you do a subscription. Channel
Client moderator actions. Okay.
Now, does this have channel points in it? That's the other question. Is that API implemented in here yet? So
that is a good question.
Points. So channel points are in the dev branch.
Experimental.
It looks like it's experimental. So it's in pub sub, but it's in dev. So let's go to the pub sub one, and let's switch to dev. Okay.
Well, Lila's code has channel points.
Okay.
How can you miss it?
I missed it. I must have missed it. Hang on.
You gonna search for points or something?
Yeah, let's go search for points. Apparently I'm not searching GitHub correctly.
It's in the pub sub, Lila says.
Okay. Oh my god, apparently I've completely forgotten how to use my computer. Okay. All right. So here it is. This is the one, right? Right. And we'll search for pub sub here. Okay, so here we go. Twitch pub sub service. Cool. The client that connects to chat, which is one thing we need to do, and then the pub sub, which listens for events like cheers. Okay, I'm with you now. So this is her pub sub service. So this is connection.
Right.
It's got some signal R in there. When the signal R in yours, Layla, is for talking to your front end, right? That makes things happen. So
on reward redeemed, that's what you're looking for.
Okay, so invoke async on the connection. So this is the thing. I see. Okay. So this is the thing this pushes the event to your front end. So So this is all the code you have to get connected to listen to events? It seems like so little.
Well, if the SDK is doing all the heavy lifting,
Yeah,
I
that's what
don't
it seems
see
like.
that as a surprise for, just calling the API endpoints and hooking up your custom events, right? or custom functions
No, yeah,
or
that's
handlers
true.
for the events.
So let's see. Startup.
And connection is a signaler hub. Yep. So you don't need to worry about the code, just the if. Yeah. So the connection will push something, whatever, into your signaler, but it can be anything.
Yeah, but that's going to her front end though, right? To make the snow and all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
Or
so
whatever the thing is that makes that's downstream, right? Like so the
Yes.
incoming event, the incoming event is hung by the.
She said you can completely ignore the MVC project.
Oh, okay, good. All right, easy enough. So this client service.
Uh-huh. Oh, there you go.
So let's see. So it's a WebSocket client. Okay, so this connects up.
Mm-hmm.
And then this has all the different notifications, which I'm assuming these are all published by TwitchLib. So these are all the events that we can hook into. Now the only question becomes, can we in TwitchLib? Well, we wouldn't have events, right? Because if our function's dying and coming back to life with a webhook, then, I mean, I guess potentially there'd still be an event, but there's a lot of things to get hooked up there. So because this has the socket going, yeah, that's exactly the problem I'm thinking about, Caparino, is how does the function listen for events if we're doing webhooks? Because the socket, we'd have to do a web job or something to keep it running all the time.
You could use a signaler, I suppose, or event hubs.
Well, but
you still need to listen to something, right? Yeah.
We can't control how we can't control Twitch and say, please put your events into this event hub this way.
Oh, I know. What are they called? The functions that are ever present.
Okay.
Durable functions.
Durable functions are one way, but that still doesn't. But durable functions are all about the. Why does this want snooty? I don't know what snooty is. It's some sort of a pit thing. Okay, we're just gonna skip that. I don't know why. I don't even know what's running in here that uses Python. To be quite honest, because it's all .NET thing. Anyway, doesn't matter that. Okay. I'm just gonna do the API for the moment. We'll come back. I'll come back and figure out the library. But for the moment, I just want to see it work. So, because durable functions, the connection is still severed, right? So in a durable function, the connection is still going to be severed by the fact that the function itself doesn't stay up that long. So that socket's going to get cut off. So, okay. We got to do a verification hook, right?
Mm-hmm.
So function, although I think the names have to be the same, right? So let's go to the docs. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add our subscription, right?
Yeah, we need to authenticate and start working with our subscription.
Okay, so we post to our subscription. So we post to the subscriptions endpoint. We need to find all of this data. We got to figure out what our broadcaster user ID is, which I have no idea. And
Yeah, that's gonna be a doozy to work out. I remember I had
I
looked at
can't-
that briefly.
You think it'll be that bad?
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right.
Maybe I remember wrongly, but finding my broadcaster ID, it's not straightforward. You can't see it in the portal.
Well, I'm sure it's got to be like in a URL or something somewhere. I'm sure we'll find it. Okay. So what we need to send is we need to do, so we don't want to do a channel follow. We want to do a custom reward redemption ad. That's the first thing we need. That's the first subscription we need. Right. Okay. So we've got that. We need to figure out our user ID, which it looks like we could get out of here, perhaps. Maybe it's in account settings. Overview.
Let's see. This is a useful tool. Twitch tokengenerator.com. Haha.
Yeah, I have seen that one.
There is, because
oh no,
if I remember
oh no.
correctly, what?
Oh no,
Did you
oh
give
no.
out all your information?
No, I don't, did I just dox myself the same way that...
Damn. Click too fast. Hey. You got a visitor.
I do have a visitor.
Is he coming to stream with us?
Are you gonna come? You gonna come stream with this kiddo? He'll probably take down my screen and everything else. Hang on.
Someone did a conference talk the other day with their 2-year-old dressed as Spider-Man on their lap. I mean,
Yeah,
that's an impressive skill.
Well, here's my 2-year-old without any pants. All right, come on, kiddo. I'll see you in a little bit, kiddo. Oh, well, you know what? At least he's excited to be here. He's excited I'm his dad, so at least somebody is. Okay. Where do we find our user? Where do we find our user ID? Is it in here? We don't really want bot chat. We want a custom scope. Where is our user? Where is our broadcaster ID? Surely that must be somewhere. Let's see. Twitch broadcaster ID. Although, you know, we could do is just make a call against. We could just call it. We could just call it. Call the API ourselves, right?
Yes.
Because it's not our channel ID, it's our broadcaster ID.
Yeah, it is different.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I struggle to find it. Like, it almost feels like getting started is the first hard one. It's working it out.
We could just call get user by ID.
Uh-huh.
And, oh, this actually doesn't require any authentication? It says authentication none. That doesn't seem right.
You can call to retrieve active user and find it by his claims, says Nick, the first one.
What is this?
Well, you need to find your user ID, and I couldn't find my user ID.
Yeah, so essentially then I'll just get user.read out of here.
Uh-huh.
So we get user.read. I'll do this on another window. So I don't dox myself. So let's do user.read. Let's see, generate. Yes, it's fine. Swifty, spiffy. Yes, I'm not a robot. Come on. Alright, so I have an access token. So I just really need to call api.twitch.tv. Yeah, okay. Let me get my postman up here. Authorization. Get my token in here so nobody can see it.
Don't dox yourself.
Okay. So we're going to call api.twitch.tv. Is that us, I guess?
Yes.
User, I guess? I don't know. Not
well,
found.
It says, it's user and then user ID or users? Oh, okay.
No, it's api.twitch.tv/Kraken, which I'm assuming is a user, right? Or is that a bad assumption? Is Kraken an actual API path?
Is that not their API name?
Oh no, actually, I think that is the name of the API.
Yeah, yeah. That brings back fond memories of trying to fiddle with that.
Okay, so it needs a client ID.
Kraken is v5.
Oh, it's a header called client dash.
Oh, Helix is the new one. There's a newer version of the API, but let's make it work with the older one, I assume, unless they're deprecating it.
Oh, it says, now it says it's totally gone, even though it's in the docs. Hello. Oh, I guess I am in the legacy thing. Okay, so let's go.
Helix.
Okay.
Oh, Nick, the first one has put the link on the chat. Maybe you want to use that one? Thank you. Thank you, Nick.
Oh, so it's just Helix WAC users. Okay, so let's get users. Thank you. And then get user follows. We'll just get user. Just get a single user. Just delete a user follow. I guess it's just get users with a specific. See, I need to know my ID. I don't know my ID.
Exactly. I was going around in circles trying to figure out how this thing worked. It's insane.
It feels very circular. Like, I don't know how on earth to get my own ID. Like, I guess maybe it's users and then login name? I guess? I don't know.
Client ID, I think, is the Twitch stream you're connecting to. Ah. But it should be an ID, not a name, right? Can you pass the name?
So, let's see. So, it's api.twitch.tv/whack helix whack users. Okay. Oh, okay. Hang on. I got something. I'm assuming this is my broadcaster ID. The 54444 blah 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 blah.
It looks like it. That's the format that it expects. Nice.
So this is calling Helix WAC users, right?
Uh-huh.
So I think that's cool there. Okay.
Nick is checking to see how he implemented his, but thanks for helping out, Nick.
Okay, so we got our broadcaster.
Teamwork for the win.
We have a broadcaster user ID, and then our callback is going to be. Should we just use ngrok for now, maybe?
Yeah.
Might be easier than
Spinning it up somehow.
Yeah, might be easier than that. All right, so let's get ngrok up and going. Get my terminal here. So ngrok we'll use. I think I called it. I think my subdomain was called 425 bot.
Yep, that's the one I've seen messages from.
Okay, cool. So we've got that up and going. So we got our ngrok reverse tunnel going, which is cool. So now we can actually receive stuff in. Cool. Okay. No, I put up an access token. Oh well, I can get revoked. I did it. I was trying not to.
Yourself.
I
Come
tried
on,
not
man.
to, but all right. So it's
Fine,
425 show or 425 bot.ngrok.io, and it will be API channel points hook.
Hey, Nick, thanks for the follow, man. Oh, he was using the library that hides the client ID behind the SDK code. Interesting.
Okay. So that's custom redemption. That's custom reward redemption ads. That's the first subscription that we want to get, right? And we need to post that somewhere. We need to post it to event sub subscriptions. And do I include that secret? Must use a secret. Oh, I guess that secret they're going to send back to me so we can validate it, right? So we need to post this here. This, essentially this payload, right? This is where I guess this is where stuff like TwitchLib would come in handy. It's just the setup of it, seems so.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got to post this data in, and then that's going to call this with something, right? So it's going to respond with this, right? Twitch response indicating the subscription request status is verification pending, so that's here. So that's in the response. Then we're going to get a separate call in, which is a post to our callback URL. And that callback URL is going to have a message signature. Ah, I see. So we have to validate the signature. That'll be fun. And then return the value of the challenge back. So
A lot of back and forth. I wonder if the SDK simplifies everything.
well, does the SDK let us use webhooks?
That's a good question. Does anybody know on the stream?
Let's see. Pub sub webhook. So there is a Twitch lib webhook, although it looks pretty old. So I'm guessing maybe it's the old API.
And they haven't wrapped through the latest API 3 years ago. Damn. This requires .NET 2.1 preview. Yeah, I guess 3 years ago 2.1 was in preview.
So there's TwitchLib API. I wonder if we could use that TwitchLib API instead of the pub sub one. Because this looks like this is where all the webhook subscriptions end up being, right? So maybe this is the best place to do it. Maybe we should just use it this way. Okay. All right, let's get back here. So we're gonna install, go and install it. Is it just TwitchLib on NuGet?
Yeah, it should be.
We want the API package, it looks like. I don't know if we need the... I guess we can just include all of them. We don't need to separate them. So TwitchLib. Okay.
Yeah, you probably want the superset.
Okay. So we've got that.
Wow.
So now initializing this.
Mm-hmm. It's like cooking with JP when you code. I like the singing.
What does that even mean?
What does it even mean? Like you're enjoying it so much, like cooking, you know? It's like a chef. Did you bang the drums, or is your son banging the drums?
No, it's a 2-year-old. No, my 2-year-old is.
His synchronization timing is perfect. We should get him on the show. I love it, man. I need to start saying things while he's banging the drums. So if I land it correctly, there will be a badum at the end of my my comment. Right.
All right. Let's look at TwitchLib API. Let's look at that sample.
There's a pub sub sample below that, or is it?
Here it is. Interesting that I guess it expects you to have an access token. I wonder if there's any way for it to do it for you, but
that's what we saw before, right? Did we not see that somebody had the had in the settings, and I was like, the access token is coming from the config file. That's weird. And that's a 60-day access token, right? So how do you refresh it?
Well, I mean, my assumption is that either this package or a different package has something that does the OAuth for us, but we could just do the OAuth ourselves if we have to. We're fortunate that it's client credentials, so it's not it's not completely crazy to make it work. Yeah. Okay, so
should we explain what client credentials mean to people, because they might be hearing that term for the first time?
That's a good point.
We haven't done flows.
That's true. We haven't. The client credentials flow is essentially app to app, service to service, whatever you're going to call it, server to server. So two servers talking to each other without a user in the middle, and the client credentials flow is a way for one application to authenticate itself to another. And typically, it uses what's essentially a username and password for that user.
Yeah, client ID and a client secret usually named amply.
Yep. So this is our client ID, which is not a secret. And then the access token itself, I guess I'll just go generate one just for the purposes of literally right now, and then
wipe it out.
We'll implement the proper thing next time around. So I need, in the Helix API, we need channel read subscriptions, we need channel read redemptions, we need channel manage redemptions.
Well, Silicon Orchid says, confusingly, there are two access tokens in play. I'm not surprised. There's a token that you create for your bot to connect to a chat channel, and then there's the token for the channel you're connecting to the pub sub.
So interesting. Interesting.
You want to give permissions to access channel events, right? So as a channel owner, you want to give permissions to access channel events. So you can pub sub.
This feels a little silly, not gonna lie. Like, why do we? I guess I don't know. I don't know why we have to do it. Why we have to do it twice, but I'm gonna say okay for now. So. I'm totally believe it. It just seems kind of like it seems like a bunch of extra hoops. Granted, I also work for the place I work for has Azure AD. So if there's anything, if anybody should know anything about jumping through extra hoops, you know. Okay, so I'm gonna
Yanisco is asking, do I need to consent as a channel owner? I assume that this is almost like an admin consent in Azure AD, right? Similar concept.
Yeah, it is. Yep. So you'll have to do it, but as a channel owner, you'll have to do it. Although I don't know how you. That's another good question too. Is how do you do consent in Twitch? Is there do you go through an authorization flow once? I don't know.
We're not going to find out as soon as I found it hard to get my head around. I've got a personal Evernote that I created earlier in the year that I'm looking at right now, and it still looks hard work. Somebody should write a blog post about how to authenticate for your bot. Or
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Once we work it out, we'll put a blog post. Add it to the list of the other 20 blog posts that we have to do. In fact, this week I'm doing the JavaScript reset, not edit profile, it was reset password for JavaScript with B2C. Since it seems to be an issue for some of our users. And it was an issue for me, I had to work it out.
Okay. So I created a user secret on a different window. Thank you very much. Although let me clear that. Okay. Just remind me not to hit up in the thing. So we've got, we'll just do Twitch client ID. And then we've got Twitch API key, which we have as, oh no, did I call it that? Twitch, I'm calling it Twitch API key, even though it really isn't an API key. It's an API, it's a client secret key, but whatever. And then this is in secrets.
Naming is hard, my friends.
Yes, it is. We got to go get our client ID, get that out of here. Okay. All right. And then we got to go get our configuration in here. So,
get environment variable, right?
I guess we got to. I gotta add a. Let's see. Config. What is it? Builder. Oops. Oh come on. Oh, I'm not in a startup. And I don't have an execution context either. Oh god.
Yeah.
We're going to have to refactor the hell out of this. Okay.
Well, get it working first and worry about the rest later. Thank you for the follow-up VFX __. With one underscore.
How many are there?
Gifbot.io. Make it simple. What is gifbot.io? Is that to throw GIFs?
Okay. Let me pull this up. Since I already have a big part of this anyway. Okay. So we got a configuration builder we're going to use. I'm just going to go get all the... We'll set our base path, which we get out of the context. And we'll add our app setting or local settings file. We'll add our environment variables, so we'll get them in production. Cool. Okay. So our client ID is Twitch client ID. Our Twitch API settings access token is that's right. I only have a secret. I need an access token itself. For at least for today, we'll do Twitch API access token, and I am going to go get one. I thought I already had one, but I must have put it somewhere else.
Yeah, you did get one just before, and then you said I'm going to put it in a different window, so somewhere around there.
Oh no, actually I need, because we're going to be using this, I actually need to use the client ID of this token generation thing. Because the token generation tool is the thing that generated the key. You know, you see what I mean? So they're not going to match up. Okay. So now it becomes Helix, webhooks.
So we'll need to test it somehow.
Well, I'll just run it locally, right?
True. Well, we need somebody to redeem points, right?
The chances of us getting that done in the next 11 minutes are essentially zero.
We'll do our best.
I enjoy your your optimism, my friend, but I am not confident that this is going to happen. So let's see. This is subscription stuff.
Says the guy that hasn't even built the code yet, and it will run on the first go.
No, it won't. No, this isn't going to run. I actually don't know if I can do my webhook in here. Yeah, this is dumb. Okay.
Yeah, what is going to trigger the function, right?
Well, right now it's just an HTTP function, so we'll just trigger it manually ourselves for the moment. But
okay,
we got to set up the subscription, and I'm guessing it doesn't look like in here the event sub stuff isn't in there. So unless it's in subscriptions, yeah, there's get broadcaster subscriptions and get user subscriptions, but which one would it be? What does get broadcaster subscriptions do?
Oh, API docs?
Yeah, they're in they're in here somewhere. I mean, actually the webhook one is still separate, which is interesting too.
Yeah.
Okay. Go look at the docs. These are all events, right? Which we kind of knew they had to be. How do I do? Let's just do the subscription, the webhook subscription. Oh no, I hit the wrong button. No. These all have a bunch of events too. Stream online, stream offline. Although, to be honest, at this point, might just do it ourselves, or not do it in a function and switch. So we have something that can sit around and keep webhooks.
I mean, we can try as a console app, right? Maybe we set it up as a web job, or does the web job still need to have a trigger?
No, web job should work.
There you go.
I mean, I need to send this, right? We need to send this payload to this endpoint.
Yeah.
So I'm going to send it for the moment. Here, we'll just do a post. And I will put my authorization header in here, which I have from here. Okay. And we need this data in the body. So let's go get it. Raw JavaScript. We need this data in the body. Oops, uncommented. Should probably uncomment it here first. Okay, so let's go post this data in. So JSON, not JavaScript. So we want channel points custom reward redemption.add. This is our user ID. This is our webhook, which is going to API whack channel points hook, and then secret. I don't know. We'll just whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, I got to get this. This needs to be running first, right? Because otherwise, Otherwise, there won't be anything listening for it. So all I really want to do though is we really just kind of want to dump the body.
Yep. We have a long way to go, but it is a start.
Yeah, it's a start.
We found our long-term project after Thrasman.
I'll just return the data in the body. Data. Okay. All right. So let's run this. Was it func start? 8 minutes. It's not going to happen.
Plenty of time.
Not going to happen in 8 minutes, but that's okay. We're going to make it
will
work.
happen.
We're going to make it work.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's localhost 7071 API channel points hook. Okay, that looks cool. All right, so that all seemed to work. We've got our ngrok running. Let's zoom this in. So ngrok is running, so we should. Client ID and OAuth token do not match. Right, they don't, because I'm using a client ID from. I'm using this other app as a client ID, the token getter online thingy. So let's see. Where do I put that in? Is that a header? Oh, I need to post it for starters. Okay. Just didn't want to accidentally dox myself again. Okay, so is there, it was the client ID header, I believe, need to be in there. I did provide an app token. Why does it say we didn't provide one? Let's go back and look at the...
Should it be in the header?
Well, I've got one. I've got it in the header.
Also, Silicon Orchid says, if this helps, I don't directly use the TweetSlib API. I use the client and PubSub. That lets me use things like TweetSlib client initialize with credentials and then secret channel name. Oh. So it's he's passing Silicon Orchid. I assume it's he. He's passing the credentials plus the channel name, and that allows you to initialize and authenticate your client. That's interesting, right?
Well, yeah, hang on. Yeah, I guess if I could initialize my client without opening a socket connection to do it, then at least that would handle. At least we'd have some. If we could get some sort of like an authenticated, API, client that we can use. Then we could use that, which would be nice. So it's looking for a client ID header. Okay, so the client ID header. Okay. All right, so client ID header. Okay, so here's our authorization token. Here's our client ID. That's in the header, right? Still saying we don't have a valid app token, which is interesting. So I've got the client ID of the Twitch token generator, right?
Right.
And they have to use the client ID that's associated to the token that was issued. So because the token was issued from this app, we've got that. And then the permissions are on the Helix one are channel read subscriptions.
Yep.
Channel read redemptions and channel manage redemptions. So when we create a subscription, so we got the client ID in the header. That's what this one header is here. The authorization is in the header, obviously. We have our body that has all of our pieces in it. I'm not going to click authorization because that'll show the thing.
Do not.
But it says must provide a valid app token. But that's the token that I got from. That's the token that I got from here, right? So, okay, so the token's there, right?
Did you click authorization? Oh, you're hiding it. Nice.
I'm hiding the other side of the window. So we click authorization, right? Maybe there's a scope missing that I need to add that I have not added. What scope do you need to create a subscription? You must include an app access token in all API requests, which is what we're doing. You do not need to include a user access token even for subscriptions, blah, blah, blah. This is because Twitch checks authorization throughout the lifetime of your subscription. Oh, I wonder if I'm actually not using an app access token with this app. I'm using a user access token. What we need is an app access token. And the app access token we get through a normal client credential flow. So let's go do that first. Client credential flow is getting tokens, client credentials. Here we go. So client credential is essentially this. You post a client ID and a client secret, and that's it.
And you get
And you get a token back. So let's do that. That actually makes things significantly more straightforward than you needing user auth, which I suppose we will for the bot itself, right?
Yes.
Okay. id.twitch.tv. Oh, look, I actually already have one out here.
And I think you'll be that'll be the last thing to do because we're 2 minutes out from our end of the stream.
Good. Very, very, very good point. So yeah, okay. Well, then we'll put a cap on it, and I don't know. Maybe tomorrow or maybe Wednesday, we'll just come back and see how much more of this we can get done. Yeah, I guess we do got to go though because we got somebody else is gonna be coming on behind us. Well, cool. Thanks for hanging out with us today, everybody. We will be back. We'll be back tomorrow on Learn TV. We're gonna talk about OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect and why the kind of problems those protocols solve. Friday we'll have our big blowout. Layla's gonna be there. A bunch of other people are gonna be there. Just everybody hanging out for the holidays right before the Christmas. And in the interim, Wednesday we're going to be on with Cecil Phillip on what?
It's on Reactor, right?
On
so
Reactor.
We're doing a live stream. There's still time to register if you want. Follow us on Twitter to see how to sign up for it. And then we also have an impromptu introduction to Microsoft Identity stream with the TechFest calendar, or for the TechFest calendar. Right after or right before? Right after. So 8.
That'll be on Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday. Did I not say Wednesday?
Yeah.
That's Cecile. Wednesday is Cecile. And TechFest calendar is also on Wednesday. Back to back.
Cool. So
Yes.
yeah, so we got a busy week, but feel free to reach out to us, 45show@microsoft.com. If you need anything, find us on Twitter.
Don't forget to join us on Friday because we'll have some surprises.
So
And
cool.
a festive stream.
All right, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day. We'll hopefully see you later this week. Thanks for hanging out with us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.